Your ancestor never went to a gym, never counted a calorie, never owned a single supplement, and yet, by almost every meaningful biological marker, they were probably healthier than you are right now. Stronger bones, better cardiovascular fitness, lower rates of the diseases currently killing most people in the developed world. This is not romanticism. This is what shows up in the skeletons. Start with the bones, because bones do not lie. When researchers examine the skeletal remains of pre-agricultural humans, hunter-gatherers from tens of thousands of years ago, they consistently find something striking: bone density that exceeds that of modern elite athletes. A 2015 study published in PLOS One, led by researchers including Colin Shaw at Cambridge University, compared the leg bone strength of early agricultural-era humans to modern populations and to trained cross-country runners. The early humans matched or exceeded the runners, not the average sedentary modern person, the athletes. Your ancestors were not occasionally active. Their entire existence was a form of continuous, varied, load-bearing movement that modern exercise science is still trying to replicate in a one-hour gym session. This is not about working out. It is about a body that was never separated from the demands that built it. Walking 5 to 15 kilometers a day was not exercise to your ancestors. It was Tuesday. Carrying water, digging roots, climbing for fruit, throwing spears, hauling carcasses. This was not a fitness regimen. It was simply what existing required. The modern body sits for 8 hours, then tries to compensate with 45 minutes on a treadmill. Your ancestor's body never needed to compensate for anything because the movement was never separated from life in the first place. Now consider the diet. This is where the comparison gets genuinely uncomfortable. Anthropologist S. Boyd Eaton, working with Melman Connor at Emory University, published influential research in the 1980s comparing the nutrient profile of pre-agricultural diets to the modern Western diet. Their findings, later expanded by decades of additional research, showed that pre-agricultural diets were extraordinarily diverse, sometimes drawing on over 100 different plant and animal species across a year, compared to the handful of crops that supply the overwhelming majority of calories in the modern food system. Wheat, corn, rice, and soy alone account for the bulk of what most people on Earth eat today. Your ancestors never depended on 4 plants for survival. They depended on a constantly shifting menu, shaped by season, geography, and opportunity, which meant they were essentially impossible to nutritionally exploit by any single point of failure. There was also simply no ultra-processed food, no refined sugar in concentrated form, no industrial seed oils, no additives engineered to override your brain's satiety signals. The average hunter-gatherer diet contained a fraction of the sugar consumed by a typical person today, not because of willpower, but because concentrated sugar largely did not exist outside of rare honey finds. Your body evolved a powerful reward response to sugar precisely because it was scarce. That same reward circuitry, faced with a world of unlimited, cheap, concentrated sugar, becomes a liability rather than an asset. This is not a moral failure on your part. It is a mismatch between ancient wiring and a modern environment engineered to exploit it. Here is where the data becomes genuinely jarring. Cardiologist Randall Thompson led a landmark study published in The Lancet in 2013 using CT scans to examine the arteries of mummified remains from 4 ancient civilizations spanning more than 4,000 years: Egyptian, Peruvian, ancestral Puebloan, and Unangan populations. The team found atherosclerosis, the artery hardening condition responsible for most modern heart attacks and strokes, in over a third of the mummies. This finding gets misused constantly, used to claim heart disease was simply inevitable, a normal part of aging, regardless of lifestyle. But look closer at which populations these were. The mummies came primarily from agricultural and semi-agricultural societies, not pure hunter-gatherer populations. The tissimene of the Bolivian Amazon, studied extensively in the 21st century by a research team led by Hilliard Kaplan, present an extraordinary counterpoint. Living a forager horticulturalist lifestyle with high physical activity and a low-processed diet, the tissimene were found in a 2017 study in The Lancet to have the lowest reported levels of coronary artery disease of any population ever studied, 5 times lower than the typical American population, even accounting for age. Their arteries, on average, looked 28 years younger than their American counterparts. Inflammation tells a similar story. Modern chronic disease, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, many autoimmune conditions, even some cancers, is increasingly understood as downstream of chronic low-grade inflammation. The tissimene and similarly active low-processed diet populations show markers of inflammation that are dramatically lower than industrialized populations, despite carrying a much higher burden of acute infections from parasites and pathogens. Their immune systems were busy fighting real external threats. Yours is often busy fighting a slow internal fire lit by sedentary behavior, processed food, chronic stress, and disrupted sleep. Threats your immune system was never designed to recognize as threats at all. Stress itself functioned differently. Your ancestors experienced acute, intense, short-duration stress, the genuine threat of a predator, a dangerous hunt, a sudden conflict. The hormonal stress response, the release of cortisol and adrenaline, evolved exactly for this kind of spike. Danger, response, resolution, return to baseline. What your body deals with today is different in kind, not just degree. Low-grade, unresolved, constant stress, a notification, a deadline, a financial worry, an argument replayed in your head at 2 a.m. keeps that same hormonal system activated without ever reaching resolution. Robert Sapolsky, a neuroscientist at Stanford University who has spent decades studying stress physiology, has argued that this chronic, low-grade activation is precisely what differentiates modern human stress from the stress your body evolved to handle. The system works perfectly. It was simply never built for an enemy that never goes away. None of this means modern life offers nothing. Vaccines, modern medicine, sanitation, and emergency care have saved more lives than any prehistoric innovation ever could. A hunter-gatherer with a ruptured appendix simply died. You would not. This is not an argument for abandoning civilization. It is an argument for noticing exactly what civilization quietly took from you in exchange for what it gave you, and recognizing that your body still expects the deal your ancestors had. Movement woven into daily existence rather than scheduled in, a diet built from diversity rather than industrial monoculture, stress that resolves rather than accumulates, sleep, food, and movement that aren't optimized, but simply lived. Your ancestor was not healthier than you because they tried harder. They were healthier than you because their entire environment, by default, demanded the things your environment now requires conscious, exhausting effort to recreate. The bar was not high. It was just built into the architecture of being alive. Yours is not, and that gap between what your body still expects and what your life actually delivers is where most modern disease quietly lives.